They built 96 houses on my land, not by accident, on purpose. I didn't get a warning, a phone call, a letter, not even a rumor. After 3 long years of not visiting the property, I decided to drive up to Colorado to finally scatter my grandfather's ashes. But when I turned onto the old fire road, everything inside me went still. The forest that had always stood there, tall, quiet pines that smelled like my childhood, was gone. Completely gone. In its place stood an entire neighborhood, stretching across 47 acres that legally belonged to me. Beige stucco houses, paved roads, sidewalks, streetlights, mailboxes, moving trucks, and families carrying in furniture like they had been waiting their whole lives for this moment. It looked like a fully built subdivision that had been there for years, not months. But it wasn't theirs. It was mine. My grandfather, William Flint, had bought that land in 1971 for $8,200 cash. He was an old-school Depression-era man who never trusted banks. He kept every receipt, survey paper, tax note, and handwritten record inside leather notebooks that smelled of pipe tobacco and WD-40. When he passed away in 2019, he left me those notebooks, the original deed, and a single handwritten note. Don't let the bastards take what's yours. At the time, I didn't think much of it. The land was empty forest. Nobody lived there. Nothing threatened it. I paid the property taxes every April, $6,400 a year. Never missed a payment. I kept the email confirmations stored in a folder labeled Grandpa's Land. Life just got busy. I had a divorce, 2 kids in college, and 70-hour work weeks as a structural engineer. The land wasn't going anywhere? Or so I thought. When I saw the carved stone entrance sign reading Ridgeline Heights, a Whitmore luxury community, I felt my stomach twist so hard I thought I might get sick. I double-checked my GPS again and again. Same coordinates, same land. My land. But now someone had paved it over, named it, sold it, and let families move into homes they believed were theirs. I drove up to the security gate, trying to stay calm, trying to believe this was some kind of misunderstanding. A young guard stepped out of the booth and raised a hand to stop me. "Residents only," he said, with the bored voice of someone following a script. "I'm the property owner," I told him, holding up my phone with a photo of the deed. He laughed, actually laughed. "Sure, man," he said, "and I'm Elon Musk. Turn around." Before I could respond, a white Range Rover rolled up beside me. The door opened, and out stepped a woman who looked like money wrapped in silk. Cassandra Whitmore, mid-50s, Botoxed into a permanent look of mild surprise. Gold bracelets, a Rolex, white linen clothes that probably cost more than my truck was worth. She didn't look at me at first. She looked at the guard. "Problem, Ray?" she asked. "This gentleman claims he owns the development." Then she finally looked at me, slowly, intentionally, starting at my work boots, moving up to my worn Carhartt jacket, then my calloused hands. I watched her mentally place me into a box labeled poor. She said, "How charming," with a small laugh. "If you're looking for construction work, most crews are full, but I can take your number." I felt my jaw tighten. "I'm not looking for work," I said. "This land belongs to me. My grandfather, William Flint, owned these acres." Her smile sharpened into something colder. She pulled out her phone and typed something with manicured nails. "Our title company ran a forensic search. This land was abandoned for over 3 years. Under Colorado adverse possession statute, that makes it legally ours." "It means nothing if the property taxes were paid," I told her. She rolled her eyes like she was tired of my existence. "Sweetie, you know just enough to be dangerous." Then she held out a business card between 2 fingers like it was contaminated. "Call our attorney, Brian Keir. He can explain why your claim is, what's the legal word? Oh yes, frivolous." I took the card, but kept my eyes on her. "How many houses are sold?" I asked. She smiled again, proud this time. All 96. 16 million in pre-construction sales. Families moving in by Thanksgiving. She leaned closer, as if sharing a secret. This development is fully permitted through Boulder County. If you continue trespassing, I will call Sheriff Mitchell personally. We're major contributors to their department's equipment fund. Then she lifted her phone and snapped a photo of my license plate. Just in case you come back and vandalize anything, we have excellent security footage. She leaned even closer, lowering her voice to a whisper. People like you don't win against people like us. I drove home that day with my hands shaking so badly I could barely keep the wheel straight. I felt humiliated, angry, confused, and terrified all at once. When I reached my house, I didn't even take off my boots. I went straight to the kitchen table and laid out every document my grandfather ever kept. The original deed from 1971, every single tax receipt from 1971 to 2019, every email confirmation of my online tax payments, every survey map. Cassandra thought she had scared me into walking away. What she didn't know was that she had just given me the one thing I needed most: motivation. The next morning, I called the number on Cassandra's business card. A receptionist answered with the kind of overly pleasant voice dentists use when delivering bad news. Mr. Keir is in depositions all week, but he expected your call. She offered me a nuisance settlement of $15,000 if I signed a quitclaim deed by Friday. $15,000 for land worth more than $4 million? A quitclaim deed meant giving up all rights without any guarantee the other side even had rights to begin with. My divorce lawyer once told me, never sign a quitclaim unless you're absolutely sure you're walking away from nothing. I hung up the phone without another word. I needed a real lawyer, the kind that made people like Cassandra worry. My friend Marcus recommended someone in Wyoming, a woman named Lydia Chen, a woman known for tearing apart corporations twice her size. I paid her $500 consultation fee with a credit card I shouldn't have used, sat in her office, and told her everything. She listened in complete silence, flipping through my papers with calm, precise eyes. When she finished, she closed the folder and looked at me steadily. If your tax payments are real, their adverse possession claim is dead. Relief started to rise in me, but she held up a finger. But here's what I would do, and you're going to think I'm crazy. She leaned forward. Let them finish building. I stared at her. She explained. If we stopped construction now, the developers would file bankruptcy. The land and houses would get trapped in lawsuits with banks, buyers, insurers, and the county. It would take years. Everyone would blame me, the legal owner, for ruining 96 families' lives. But if we waited until the houses were finished and people had moved in, then filed for declaratory judgment, the law would be on my side. I would legally own 96 completed homes. The developers would face fraud charges for selling property they didn't own. They would be desperate to settle, desperate to avoid prison, desperate to avoid losing everything. It was cold. It was strategic. It was brutal. And it made perfect sense. I hired her that day. Even though I had no idea how I would pay the legal fees, even though I knew things would get worse before they got better, even though Cassandra had already threatened me, I hired her because she understood something I had forgotten. The land was mine, and I wasn't going to let the bastards take it. After hiring Lydia, my life fell into a strange rhythm, half normal, half war. During the day, I worked long hours, trying to keep my mind focused. At night, I sat at my kitchen table, sorting documents, printing maps, checking county records, and emailing Lydia anything that looked even slightly important. She answered every message, no matter how late, with the same calm confidence. "Good, keep collecting," she'd write, or "Perfect, this will help us." Those small replies kept me going when everything else was starting to crack around me. I made 2 trips a week to the property,
always staying on the public road like Lydia told me. Every time I drove up, the construction looked more complete. What had once been forest now resembled a thriving suburb. Frames turned into finished walls. Roofs went up. Driveways were poured. Children's bicycles stood outside houses that technically didn't exist on real ownership records. And every time I visited, Cassandra spotted me. She didn't come over again, but she always made a show of taking pictures, pointing at me from a distance like I was a dangerous animal and making phone calls while staring in my direction. I recorded everything. Time-stamped photos, location coordinates, notes in a logbook. I became an unwilling expert in documenting fraud. 3 weeks into this routine, I was parked on the shoulder taking pictures when a sheriff's cruiser pulled up behind me, blue lights flashing. My heart dropped. The deputy who stepped out looked young, mid-20s maybe, and already uncomfortable. "Sir," he said, "I need to see your license." I handed it over, keeping my voice steady. "I'm on a public road," I said. "The land beyond the fence is mine." He didn't argue. He walked back to his cruiser, ran my plate, then returned with a sigh. "Look," he said quietly, "Mrs. Whitmore filed a complaint. Says you're harassing residents." He didn't sound convinced. He sounded tired. So I gave him the truth. "I'm documenting construction on land I legally own. Check Boulder County records. Parcel number 55932-408. The deputy shifted awkwardly. "Sir, property disputes are civil matters. My hands are tied. But if she calls again saying you're threatening her, we'll have to take action." He looked mortified saying it. Translation was obvious. She donates money to the sheriff's department. You don't. I nodded, thanked him, and let him leave. I kept taking pictures. By November, the first families moved in. U-Hauls crowded the cul-de-sac. Kids played on scooters while parents unpacked. Someone planted a small maple tree in their front yard. Another family carried a crib inside. Watching them made my stomach twist. They weren't the villains. They were victims who didn't know they were living on stolen property. But I couldn't tell them. Lydia was clear. No talking, no posts, no warnings. If you speak to them now, the Whitmores will twist it and use it against you. Let the law work. The day before Thanksgiving, a certified letter arrived in my mailbox. The return address said Whitmore Development, LLC. I signed it for it at the post office, and the clerk, an older woman named Deb, who'd known my grandfather, frowned when she handed it to me. "My sister tried buying one of those overpriced McMansions. Almost $500,000. Highway robbery." I opened the letter in my truck. It was written by Cassandra's attorney. 3 pages long, dense with legal threats. They accused me of trespassing, harassment, creating a hostile environment, and interfering with business operations. Attached was a photo of my truck parked on the public road. Someone had circled the license plate in red marker. A handwritten note next to it read, "Document everything." I took the letter straight to Lydia. She laughed. She actually laughed. She said, "This is beautiful. Do you know what they just admitted? They know the property is disputed. They know you're the owner, and they continued building anyway. This helps us." I didn't feel helped. I felt hunted. But Lydia kept repeating the same line. "Trust me, every attack they make becomes evidence." She handed me a new assignment. Find out everything you can about Cassandra and her husband. Permits, business records, loan documents, anything public. And Dakota, keep it quiet. The less noise, the better. So I spent 2 weeks becoming a detective. I dug through Boulder County's online system, found Whitmore Development, LLC registered in Delaware, classic move for companies that want to hide things. Cassandra was listed as the sole managing member. The financing came from a company called Ridgeline Capital Group in Denver. I dug deeper. One of the partners at Ridgeline was Preston Whitmore, Cassandra's husband. Records showed that he'd been sued twice for construction defects and once for investor fraud in a failed resort project. All settled quietly, documents sealed. A pattern began to emerge, and it wasn't a good one. Then I found the most important detail of all. Ridgeline Heights permits listed the land as formerly tax delinquent. Someone had filed an adverse possession claim in March 2022, but here was the catch. Adverse possession claims don't automatically transfer ownership. You must win the case in court first, get a judge to sign a ruling, then record that ruling with the county. They had skipped steps 1 and 2. They had filed a claim, then immediately started selling houses as if they already owned the land. That wasn't a mistake. That was fraud. Documented, deliberate fraud. I emailed everything to Lydia through an encrypted drive. She called me an hour later. I could hear excitement under her usual calm. Dakota, this is better than I thought. If we can prove they knowingly built on land they didn't own, it becomes criminal fraud, not just civil. She paused. How do you feel about that? I didn't know. A mix of fear and hope. You just keep recording everything, she said. I'll handle the rest. But then things got worse. Much worse. On December 3rd, I received a call from Boulder County Code Enforcement. A man named Rick Polson told me he'd received a complaint saying I was using my land as an illegal dumping site. Construction debris, old vehicles, hazardous waste. I don't even live there. I haven't been on that land since August. He insisted he needed to inspect the site. So I drove up, recording everything. When we met at the property, Polson looked annoyed, not at me, but at the situation. He inspected the land. Nothing was there. No debris, no cars, no trash, just manicured lawns belonging to the subdivision. Someone filed a false report, he said. When I asked who, he checked the notes. Anonymous complaint, but it came through Mrs. Whitmore's office. He lowered his voice. Off the record, every Whitmore project I've inspected has had false complaints filed against neighboring landowners. It's a pattern. He handed me his card. If you need a witness statement, call me. That night, I sat in my truck outside my house, holding Rick's card and wondering what Cassandra's endgame was. She wasn't just trying to steal my land anymore. She was trying to bury me under complaints, fines, fear, and legal headaches. She wanted me to quit. She assumed I would quit. But every time I thought of quitting, I remembered my grandfather's note, "Don't let the bastards take what's yours." By Christmas, 84 houses were occupied. Lights hung from roofs, kids built snowmen beside yards that technically belonged to me, and Lydia told me we were filing our case on January 12th, right after the holidays when the Whitmores least expected it. But then, right after New Year's, Cassandra made her most vicious move yet. A Facebook post. Using a local community group, she wrote, "Alert! Local man Dakota Flint has been stalking residents of Ridgeline Heights, taking photos of children, making families feel unsafe. He claims he owns our neighborhood. Sheriff is aware. Please report any sightings." Within hours, it had hundreds of shares. Within a day, my life fell apart. But that was only the beginning.
The Facebook post hit me harder than anything Cassandra had done before. It wasn't just an insult or a legal threat. It was an attack on who I was as a person. She didn't call me a trespasser or a fraud. She called me a danger to children, a predator, something so dirty and unforgivable that people reacted without thinking. Within one day, the post had hundreds of shares, and by the next morning, nearly 1,000. People were commenting things like, "Lock him up, keep him away from schools, and he looks dangerous." They weren't talking about a stranger. They were talking about me, a man who had never harmed anyone in his life. My daughter Emma saw the post first and texted me late at night. "Dad, what is this? Are you okay? People are saying you're stalking kids." I felt sick reading her message. My son Tyler called soon after, his voice shaking. "Dad," he said, "just tell me you didn't do anything." The fact that my own children, even for a moment, questioned me broke something inside me. I explained everything to them separately, telling them about the land, the development, the lawsuit, the harassment. I sent them screenshots and documents. Emma calmed down and told me she was on my side. Tyler did too, though I could still hear the anger and fear in his voice. Anger at Cassandra and fear of what might happen next. The next morning at work, my boss called me into his office. Martin was a good man, someone I'd known for 14 years. He looked uncomfortable when I stepped inside and closed the door. "Dakota," he said gently, "I got a call from one of our major clients. They saw something online about you, something serious." I tried to explain, but he raised a hand to stop me. "I know you," he said, "and I believe you, but the school district we're contracting with is extremely sensitive to public image. They asked if you'll be on their project team, and I had to tell them no." He took a deep breath. "I'm placing you on paid leave for now, 2 weeks. If things clear up, you can come back immediately, but if they don't..." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. I nodded and walked out with a heavy chest. By the time I got to my truck in the parking lot, people were already avoiding me. A woman from accounting who usually chatted with me in the break room looked at me, froze, and quickly walked to the other way. That was when everything became painfully real. Cassandra was destroying my reputation piece by piece, and she was succeeding. I drove home in silence, called Lydia, and told her everything. She didn't sound surprised. This is what desperate people do. They try to break you before court. But listen carefully. Do not, under any circumstances, respond to that Facebook post. Not one comment, not one message. My voice cracked as I asked her, "How do I defend myself if I can't say anything?" Lydia sighed. "You defend yourself in court, not online. If you respond publicly, they will twist it into an admission. Let me handle this. I'm filing an emergency motion for a restraining order and a defamation claim first thing Monday morning." She told me to screenshot everything, to gather every comment, every share, every message. This is evidence of malice. So that night, I sat down with my laptop and documented the entire nightmare. My fingers trembled as I clicked on comment after comment calling me dangerous, disgusting, psychotic. Someone even posted a blurry photo of my Silverado with the caption, "This is his truck. Stay away from this creep." I had never felt so exposed and powerless. That weekend was the hardest of my life. People I barely knew sent messages demanding explanations. Neighbors avoided me. And on Sunday morning, I walked outside and saw the word "pervert" spray-painted in giant red letters across my garage door. I felt physically sick. I called the police, and an older officer named Patterson came to take a report. He photographed the graffiti lazily, as if he had seen worse. When I mentioned the Facebook post, he just shrugged. "Social media gets out of hand these days. We'll increase patrols." It wasn't comforting. It didn't feel like protection. That night, I slept on the couch with a baseball bat propped beside me. Every sound outside made me jump. I didn't feel safe in my own home. And Lydia had warned me, it's going to get worse before it gets better. She was right. 3 days later, my daughter Emma called me crying. Someone had sent her a screenshot of the Facebook post with a message that read, "Your dad is a danger. Stay away from him." I drove to her apartment in Fort Collins. She opened the door with red eyes, her roommate standing behind her, both looking unsure and worried. I sat Emma down and told her every detail, from Cassandra snapping my license plate, to the attorney's fake claims, to the certified letters. I showed her the original deed, tax records, maps, everything. Slowly, I watched anger replace fear in her eyes. "She's lying about everything," she said.
Everything, I replied. She grabbed my hand. Then we fight. The next morning, Lydia called with a hearing date. Monday. A temporary restraining order hearing and a preliminary review of our defamation claim. But Dakota, she said softly, you need to be mentally ready. People like Cassandra do not stop. They escalate. I didn't think they could escalate further until my son Tyler called me later that evening. Dad, someone came to my job. His voice was unsteady. A private investigator said he was looking into you. He asked my manager if I knew about your violent history and whether I had ever been aggressive. My blood ran cold. He tried to get me fired. I almost got sent home. He texted me a photo of the investigator's card. Thomas Brennan, Apex Investigations. I forwarded it immediately to Lydia. Her voice turned sharp when she called back. This is witness tampering, and it is a felony. We will add it to the case. But she also warned me again, Dakota, they are panicking. Panicked people are unpredictable. Be careful. As if all that weren't enough, 2 days later, I received an email from the IRS. They were auditing my taxes from the past 3 years due to reported irregularities. I knew exactly what had happened. Cassandra or someone working for her had filed a false report to trigger an audit. I forwarded the email to Lydia. She didn't even sound surprised. She said, "This is good. It's more evidence. We'll subpoena the PI's client list and tie it back to the Whitmores." Good. Evidence. Case. Words lawyers understood. But I was the one living inside the storm, losing my job, my reputation, my peace, and maybe even my safety. Then came the final blow that pushed everything to the edge. A Boulder real estate blog somehow obtained the Ridgeline Heights sales contracts, all 96 of them, and the headline went viral. Luxury developer sold homes on disputed land. Buyers may lose everything. My email exploded. Homeowners begging for answers. A woman named Sarah Chen called me sobbing. She told me her savings were gone, her mortgage was approved, and now her title insurance was refusing to cover the claim. "Mr. Flint, are we going to lose our home?" I told her the truth. "You're not the villain. You're a victim. And I'm not trying to take your house. I'm trying to stop the people who stole from both of us." After we hung up, I sat in silence, feeling the weight of 96 families pressing down on my shoulders. That night, Lydia called with one more update. She said, "Channel 9 News wants to interview you. The reporter, Patricia Hughes, she's good. She'll tell the story right." I hesitated. "Won't this make everything worse?" "No," she said. "This time, the truth needs to be louder than Cassandra's lies." And so, I agreed. The next chapter of the fight was about to become very public.
The Channel 9 interview was scheduled for January 30th, and I don't think I slept the night before. I kept pacing around my house, imagining every possible way Cassandra might twist things or how the public might react. Until that moment, everything had been happening in the shadows. Legal filings, private complaints, sheriff visits, online lies. But now it was going to be exposed on television. My face, my name, my story. I wasn't sure if I was ready, but Lydia insisted this was necessary. "Truth needs light," she said. "Fraud survives in darkness. Let's end theirs." Patricia Hughes and her cameraman arrived that afternoon with enough equipment to make my living room look like a small film set. Patricia had a calm, focused presence, sharp eyes, steady voice, and a firm handshake. She wasn't there to create drama. She was there to dig for facts. I trusted her immediately. We sat on the couch while the cameraman adjusted the lights. Patricia flipped through her notes, then looked at me and said, "I'm going to ask you to tell your story exactly how it happened. No legal language, no complicated explanations, just the truth in your own words." That was something I could do. I had been living the truth for months. The interview lasted nearly an hour and a half.
I told her about my grandfather, about the land he cherished, about the deed he kept safe for 48 years. I told her about the first moment I saw the subdivision sitting where the forest used to be, about the security guard who laughed at me, and about Cassandra Whitmore taking pictures of my license plate. I explained how the developers filed an adverse possession claim and sold houses before they had any legal right to the land. Patricia listened, nodded, and asked precise questions that cut to the center of everything. Then she asked about the harassment, the Facebook post, the job loss, the graffiti, the private investigator who followed my children. Talking about that part stung. My voice shook. I could see Patricia's face tighten with anger, not at me, but at what had been done to me. When the interview ended, Patricia turned off the camera and leaned forward. I contacted Mrs. Whitmore for comment. She threatened to sue us if we aired your story. She smiled a little. We're airing it. The segment aired on February 2nd at 6 p.m., and I watched it alone in my living room with the TV remote clenched in my hand. Patricia's voice began softly. He inherited the American dream, 47 acres of Colorado forest, but what he found instead was a nightmare built on fraud. Then came drone footage of Ridgeline Heights, the exact rows of houses, the paved roads, the shiny streetlights. It cut to footage of me sitting on my couch talking about my grandfather and the land I loved. It showed the deed, the tax receipts, even screenshots of the harassment. Patricia revealed the Whitmore's connections, the bribes, the fast-tracked permits. She didn't sensationalize anything. She told everything exactly as it was. When the segment ended, my phone buzzed nonstop. My daughter Emma called crying again, but this time with relief and pride. "Dad, you were amazing." My son Tyler texted, "Proud of you, old man." My boss Martin emailed saying I could return to work Monday if I wanted. But the message that struck me the most came from a blocked number. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." I forwarded the message to Lydia. She called me within seconds. "Dakota, you must be careful now. They are cornered. Cornered people strike." Her voice was firm. "Stay alert. Lock your doors. Don't walk alone at night." She was right. Cassandra didn't stay quiet. 2 days later, I came home from grocery shopping and saw something wrong. My front door, locked that morning, was slightly open. I froze on the porch, groceries hanging from my hands. The air felt cold and silent. I stepped back and called 911. Within minutes, Deputy Torres, the same man who had warned me earlier, arrived with another deputy. They cleared the house room by room while I waited outside, my heart hammering so loudly I could hear it in my ears. When Torres came back out, he shook his head. Nothing appears stolen, but someone was definitely inside. On my kitchen table sat a single sheet of paper with 5 typed words. "Drop it or lose everything." They even placed it neatly in the center as if that made the threat more polite. Torres bagged it as evidence. He looked genuinely uneasy. "Mr. Flint, I can't accuse anyone without proof, but I recommend you don't stay here tonight." He wasn't wrong. As if fate agreed, my elderly neighbor, Carol, knocked on my door about an hour later. She looked troubled. "Dakota, yesterday I saw a black Audi SUV parked across the street. A man in a suit got out, walked up your driveway, and returned 10 minutes later." She looked down, embarrassed. "I didn't think anything of it at the time." Then she handed me a small sticky note. I wrote down the license plate. It seemed odd. The note read, KLM 4892. Deputy Torres ran the number. The car belonged to Apex Investigations, the same PI who tried to get Tyler fired. That confirmed what I already knew. Cassandra's people were escalating. That night, I drove to Fort Collins and slept on Emma's couch. I couldn't bear the thought of staying alone in my house. Every sound in the dark made me flinch. I kept the baseball bat beside me and checked the locks 3 times before trying to sleep. The days moved fast after that. Lydia told me the title company had finally broken under pressure and agreed to cooperate. They admitted Preston paid them $45,000 to push permits through, even after they warned the land wasn't properly owned. They even gave Lydia recordings of phone calls. "This is the crack that brings the whole structure down," she told me excitedly. She scheduled depositions for the next week. Preston first, then Cassandra. "We are close. Dakota, very close." But the Whitmores weren't done trying to break me. On February 6th, I woke up to an email from the IRS. My audit had expanded due to irregularities. Lydia reviewed it and said calmly, "Good, more evidence. They're panicking." But inside, I felt exhausted, like I was fighting a war on every front at once. Then, on February 9th, the morning of the trial, the parking lot of the Boulder County Courthouse was filled with news vans and cameras. The story had exploded. Lydia warned me not to speak to anyone. "No talking before the judge," she said. "Let your evidence speak." Inside, courtroom 3C was packed. Dozens of Ridgeline Heights homeowners had come to watch. They recognized me. Some looked scared, some hopeful. They didn't know what would happen to their homes. I didn't blame them. Cassandra arrived flanked by lawyers, 4 of them now, and dressed in a cream suit, her chin high, her eyes cold. When Judge Ramirez entered, the room fell silent. Lydia stood for opening statements, and her words rolled through the room like thunder. "This is not a property dispute. This is theft." She laid out everything: the forged claims, the bribes, the harassment, the lies, the fraud. Then she showed the smoking gun email from Preston admitting they knew the land wasn't abandoned. Gasps rippled across the courtroom. The trial went on for 7 intense hours. Witness after witness took the stand: code enforcement officers, county staff, even Deputy Torres. Lydia dismantled the Whitmores' defense piece by piece. By the time Preston left the witness chair, he looked destroyed. Cassandra refused to testify. Her lawyers probably told her she'd crumble under questioning. When court ended, Judge Ramirez said she'd issue her ruling within 24 hours. As we walked into the hallway, homeowners surrounded me. Sarah Chen grabbed my arm. "Will we lose our homes?" she asked, trembling. I looked at Lydia. She nodded. I said loudly, "You will keep your homes, every one of you." For the first time, hope lit their faces. That night, the clip of me speaking outside the courthouse went viral. Millions watched. And the next morning, the judge delivered her ruling. But that part changed everything. The judge's ruling arrived the next morning, and even though Lydia told me not to expect anything until late afternoon, I barely slept. I sat at my kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee, refreshing my email over and over. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped. It wasn't until 9:17 a.m. that Lydia finally called. There was no greeting, no slow build-up, just 5 words spoken with steady confidence. We won. All of it. For a moment, I didn't breathe. I just held the phone to my ear, frozen. Lydia continued, her voice sharper, almost electric. "Dakota, the ruling is devastating for them. Devastating." I asked her to explain, but she said, "I'm sending the full document. Read the first paragraph. That's all you need." Then she hung up to take another call, leaving me stunned and shaking. The PDF arrived seconds later, 18 pages long. I opened it and felt my eyes blur before I even finished the opening paragraph. The defendants engaged in a calculated, systematic scheme to defraud Dakota Flint of his lawful property through false adverse possession claims, bribery of public officials, and intentional misrepresentation. Such conduct is reprehensible and will not be tolerated by this court. The words didn't feel real at first. Fraud, bribery, scheme, reprehensible. A judge put those words in writing, in ink, forever. And then the next part hit me. Full title of all 47 acres was returned to me, including the 96 houses built illegally on top of it. Then came the damages, $4.2 million for emotional distress, trespass, and loss of use.
Then attorney fees. The Whitmores were ordered to pay the full $73,000 Lydia billed. On top of all that, the judge referred the case to the U.S. Attorney's Office for possible criminal charges against Cassandra, Preston, and their company. It felt surreal. After months of fear, humiliation, threats, and sleepless nights, justice wasn't just a wish, it was a documented reality. I must have read the first 3 pages 10 times before I finally stood up. I felt something inside me loosen, a knot I didn't even know existed. My legs almost gave out as the relief hit me like a wave. I paced the kitchen, gripping the back of a chair just to stay upright. I thought of my grandfather's note saved in the deed folder for years. "Don't let the bastards take what's yours." I whispered it aloud like a prayer. Lydia texted 10 minutes later. "Press will call. Do not answer. Come to my office at noon." I didn't argue. She had guided me this far. I wasn't about to break discipline now. The news spread fast, faster than anything before. My phone exploded with messages. Emma called in tears again, but this time they were the good kind. Tyler texted, "Yes, yes, yes!" My boss emailed a simple line, "Ready when you are." Deb from the post office left a voicemail saying she saw the news and that my grandfather would be proud. Even my ex-wife Jennifer sent a cautious congratulations. But not all messages were friendly. 2 voicemails from unknown numbers told me I'd regret destroying a community. One text said, "This isn't over." Lydia had warned me, victory doesn't erase anger, especially not for people facing criminal charges. But I wasn't scared now, not after the ruling. When I arrived at Lydia's office, she was standing by a whiteboard covered in arrows, dates, and notes. She said, "Sit," smiling in a way I hadn't seen before, a real smile, wide and satisfied. "We're not done." Not done? My head spun. Wasn't the battle over? She said, "We won the civil case, but now comes the real fallout." She clicked a button on the remote and her office TV lit up with the local news. The anchor announced the collapse of Ridgeline Development. Preston was stepping down from Ridgeline Capital. Their accounts were frozen. Their assets, including multiple properties, were being reviewed for seizure. "This," Lydia said, pointing at the screen, "is what happens when you build a real estate empire out of lies." We watched together as the story unfolded. Ridgeland Heights construction loans had personal guarantees signed by both Cassandra and Preston. That meant if the company failed, the banks would come after them personally. And because they now owed me millions, plus potential restitution to homeowners, plus legal fees, plus criminal charges, well, the empire was collapsing like a rotten beam. "Next step," Lydia said, "is deciding what happens to the 96 houses." She looked directly at me. "By law, you own all of them now." The words hit me like another shockwave. 96 houses, 96 families, an entire community. That was more responsibility than I ever imagined having. Lydia continued, "You could sell them, you could rent them, you could evict the families, if you wanted. Legally, you can do anything." But I didn't want to evict anyone. I thought of Sarah Chen's voice shaking when she called me. I thought of the families who had saved for years. They weren't thieves. They were victims of the same people who tried to destroy me. "Lydia," I said quietly, "I'm not kicking anyone out ever." She nodded, like she already knew. "Good," she said. "Then let's find a solution that honors your grandfather." That's when she suggested the idea that would define everything that came next. A community trust. A nonprofit that would hold ownership of the houses and transfer them back to the families at cost, without profit, without mortgages, without interest. A way to give them security, stability, and dignity. A way to make sure no developer could ever steal from them again. I sat back, stunned. Can we do that? We can do anything, as long as it's legal. We spent hours drafting the outline. A board, a financial plan, a payment timeline for the handful of families who still owed balances. Everything clean, transparent, fair. By afternoon, the news had reached Ridgeline Heights. My inbox filled with messages from homeowners asking what the ruling meant. Some begged, some apologized, some waited in fear.
I told them all the same thing. There will be a meeting soon. No one will lose their home. 3 days later, we held a town hall inside the unfinished clubhouse. 96 families crowded inside. They looked tired, scared, hopeful. When I walked in, the room went silent. I stood in front with Lydia beside me like a shield. "I know you're afraid," I began. "You bought homes in good faith. You trusted people who betrayed all of us. But I want you to hear this clearly. I am not here to take your homes." Gasps, tears,
This is
then
completely
complete
unacceptable.
silence.
You don't understand the
I'm
situation.
creating a
I
community
understand perfectly
trust.
well.
Each family will receive ownership of your home at the price you originally paid. No interest, no hidden fees. If you already paid in full, you owe nothing more. If you still owe part, you'll finish paying directly to the trust. People started crying openly, hugging, whispering thank yous. Emma Chen came up to me afterwards, holding her daughter's hand, tears running down her face. "You saved us," she said softly. "No," I told her. "We saved each other." That night as I drove home, I felt something I hadn't felt since this nightmare began. Peace. Not victory. Not revenge. Just peace. But the story wasn't over yet, because soon the criminal charges were coming.
After the town hall meeting, the atmosphere around Ridgeline Heights changed completely. For the first time since this nightmare began, the fear in the homeowners' faces had lifted. People waved at me from their porches when I drove by. Kids played in the snow without their parents watching me suspiciously. But even with the civil case won and the community trust in motion, Lydia warned me not to relax yet. "The civil ruling was just step one," she said. "Step two is the criminal side. And trust me, criminal charges don't stay quiet for long." The shift started with Preston Whitmore's deposition. Lydia wanted me present, not to speak, but so Preston could see me. She believed guilty people cracked faster when the person they wronged sat across from them. The deposition took place in a glass-walled conference room on the 14th floor of a Denver high-rise. Outside the windows, the Rockies stretched like frozen giants under the pale winter sun, but inside, the tension was thick. Preston walked in wearing an expensive charcoal suit, trying to look confident, but one look at him told me he was barely holding himself together. His hair was slicked back too tightly, his jaw clenched hard enough to crack a tooth, and a sheen of nervous sweat already glistened near his collar. His attorney, Diane Kelso, looked like someone who ate weaker lawyers for breakfast, but even she seemed tense. The court reporter set up her stenograph machine. Preston raised his right hand, swore to tell the truth, and sat heavily in the leather chair. Lydia began gently, almost kindly. That was her strategy: start soft, let him relax, then tighten the noose. She asked about his job title, responsibilities, how Ridgeline Capital became involved with Whitmore Development. He gave stiff, rehearsed answers, never looking at me. Then Lydia slid a piece of paper across the table. The room seemed to shrink. It was the email, the one where Preston wrote that the Flint parcel was not abandoned, that taxes were paid, and that adverse possession wouldn't hold. The email where he suggested building fast to create chaos and force me into a cheap settlement. The smoking gun. Preston stared at the page, his fingers tightening. Lydia's voice remained calm. "Do you recognize this email, Mr. Whitmore?" Preston hesitated. His attorney whispered, "You must answer." He finally muttered, "Yes." Lydia nodded. "And did you write it?" He swallowed. "Yes." The calmness of the admission made it even louder. Lydia leaned forward slightly. "So you knowingly built on land you did not own?" Diane shot up. "Objection, my client will not answer that." Lydia remained unfazed. "This is a deposition under court order. He must answer." Preston stared at the table. "I relied on the title company," he whispered. Lydia waited.
Did the title company tell you the land belonged to Mr. Flint? Preston's jaw tightened. They mentioned it. Lydia immediately slid another document forward. A bank transfer record. $45,000 from Preston to the title company. A bribe disguised as a consulting fee. His shoulders slumped. In 3 hours, Preston contradicted himself repeatedly, admitted more than he meant to, and nearly collapsed under pressure. By the time it ended, Diane was furious, Preston was pale, and Lydia was smiling in quiet satisfaction. As he hurried out, Lydia turned to me. He's finished. The criminal referral just became bulletproof. The following week was Cassandra's turn. Unlike Preston, she didn't stride in confidently, she shuffled. Her hair was too neat, her suit too perfect, like she spent all night trying to hold herself together. She avoided eye contact with everyone in the room, especially me. Lydia opened the deposition the same soft way, but Cassandra's attorney interrupted immediately. My client shall invoke her Fifth Amendment rights on all questions. That meant Cassandra would refuse to answer everything to avoid incriminating herself. Lydia expected it, but she still asked every question anyway. Mrs. Whitmore, did you sell property you did not own? I invoke my Fifth Amendment right. Did you direct harassment toward Mr. Flint? Fifth. Question after question, Cassandra hid behind silence. It made her look guilty because she was. After that deposition, everything moved quickly. Lydia met with a federal prosecutor in Denver, and within days, subpoenas were issued. The tile company handed over emails, phone records, and internal notes. One note from the manager read, "Whitmore insists land is abandoned. Warned them it is not. They said they will handle it." Another read, "Payment received. Proceed with accelerated approval." Every document dug their hole deeper. Meanwhile, the residents of Ridgeline Heights began hearing rumors. Police cars were seen near Preston's office. Journalists were trying to interview former employees of Ridgeline Capital. The homeowners held their breath. Many reached out to me, not with fear anymore, but gratitude. Thank you for fighting. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for protecting our homes. Their words didn't erase what I had gone through, but they made the suffering mean something. Then it happened, something I wasn't prepared for. One cold morning in early March, Lydia called and told me to turn on the news immediately. I grabbed the remote and switched to Channel 9. Patricia Hughes appeared on screen with a breaking news banner. Federal fraud indictment issued in Ridgeline Heights case. My heart pounded as she listed the charges: wire fraud, real estate fraud, conspiracy, falsifying documents, bribery of public officials, harassment, intimidation, and obstruction of justice. Preston was facing 6 federal charges. Cassandra was facing 3, plus a state-level harassment charge. Ridgeline Capital was being dissolved. Whitmore Development was filing bankruptcy. It felt unreal. The same people who mocked me, threatened me, smeared my name, and trespassed on my land were now facing the consequences of every lie they told. I wasn't celebrating, but I felt a heavy weight lift off my shoulders. A week later, I drove to Ridgeline Heights, not to monitor construction, but to meet the families now officially part of the community trust. The sun was setting behind the new homes, casting everything in warm gold. Children played in the yards, parents chatted on porches, and for the first time, I didn't feel like an outsider. I felt like someone who had protected something important. Sarah Chen walked over with her 2 kids. "We heard about the indictments," she said softly. "We're so sorry for what you went through, and we're so grateful." I told her the truth. I didn't do it alone. Lydia saved us all. She smiled. "Maybe, but you didn't quit." I drove home feeling more peace than I had in months. The land was safe. The families were safe. Justice was finally catching up to the Whitmores. But there was still one last chapter. The part where the community trust became real and my grandfather's legacy finally returned home.
When the indictments became public,
everything around Ridgeline Heights shifted for good. Neighbors stopped whispering. News vans finally went home. The community trust meetings turned hopeful instead of tense. For months, the development had felt cursed, like a symbol of everything that could go wrong when greed met opportunity. But now, as spring approached and the snow began melting off rooftops, the place finally felt alive. And for the first time, it wasn't built on lies. It was built on truth. The legal fallout landed fast. Preston Whitmore was arrested first. Reports said federal agents met him at his office early one morning. He didn't resist. He didn't shout. He just walked out with his suit jacket hanging crooked and his hands cuffed behind him. Cassandra wasn't taken away in handcuffs. Her attorney negotiated a surrender. But she walked into the courthouse surrounded by cameras, her face pale, her lips trembling. The woman who once stood in front of me with absolute arrogance now looked small, like someone who finally realized her money couldn't buy her out of consequences. Within a month, Preston was indicted on 6 federal charges. Cassandra accepted a plea deal, 3 years of probation, $500,000 restitution, and a lifetime ban from real estate development in Colorado. As for Whitmore Development, it collapsed overnight. Their assets were seized, their accounts drained, their investors fled. The title company they bribed lost its license permanently. And the attorney who mocked me at the gate, Brian Keir, resigned from his firm before the state could disbar him. Every piece of their empire fell apart brick by brick until nothing remained but lawsuits and regret. Meanwhile, I had a different focus, the community trust. Lydia guided every step like a general leading a peaceful war. We met with accountants, county officials, nonprofit advisors, and attorneys who specialized in land transfers. The plan was simple but powerful. Every homeowner in Ridgeline Heights would receive their deed at the original price they paid with no interest, no penalties, no tricks. If they had already paid their mortgage in full, the trust would recognize it and transfer ownership immediately. If they still owed money, they would pay it into the trust at 0 interest with flexible timelines. The day we signed the trust documents, Lydia looked at me across the conference table. She said, "This is what real justice looks like. Not revenge, stability." I nodded. She had fought harder than anyone, and without her, every one of those families would have been displaced. On March 15th, we held another community meeting, this time not for explanation or apologies, but for celebration. The clubhouse, once half-built and forgotten by Cassandra's team, was now filled wall-to-wall with homeowners. Children sat on laps, elderly couples leaned on canes. Everyone waited in a quiet, electric hush. I stepped to the front and took a breath. I said, "Today, Ridgeline Heights becomes yours, legally, permanently, safely." The room erupted in applause. People wept openly. A man I had never spoken to before, gray hair, tired eyes, hugged me so hard I nearly lost my breath. Sarah Chen stood with her kids beside her, tears streaming. She said, "We will never forget what you did." But the truth was, I hadn't done it alone. My grandfather had started this fight decades before I even knew it existed. Lydia had saved me when I was sinking, and the community had supported me when the world believed lies about me. After the meeting, families lined up to shake my hand, thank me, tell me their stories. One older woman said she and her husband had nearly emptied their retirement to buy their home. A young couple said they'd been saving for 10 years. A single mother told me she thought she would lose everything until the trust was announced. I realized then that the battle had never been about me alone. It had been about protecting hope for people who had put everything on the line. By summer, the trust was fully operational. Deeds were being transferred, families planted gardens, someone painted their front door red. Kids rode bikes along the sidewalks. The neighborhood finally felt like a real community, something that deserved to stand on solid ground. As for me, I kept 5 acres of the original land on the north end, untouched forest that my grandfather had always loved. I built a small 2-bedroom cabin there, nothing fancy, just wood, stone, and peace. I didn't hire a construction team. I built it myself on weekends. measuring each beam the way Grandpa taught me. Emma helped lay the foundation. Tyler helped lift the roof panels. When it was finished, I moved in quietly one October morning. Life became simple again. I woke up to the smell of pine and coffee. Deer wandered near the tree line. Snow fell softly on the roof in winter. Emma visited with her boyfriend, a law student who wanted to meet the man who beat a corrupt developer. Tyler drove up on weekends, bringing ingredients so he could cook for me while talking about his culinary dreams. Even my ex-wife, Jennifer, drove up one afternoon with her new husband. She told me she was proud of me, and that felt strange but healing. Patricia Hughes from Channel 9 returned in December to film a follow-up story. She interviewed families, walked through the neighborhood, and visited my cabin. The segment was titled, From Property Theft to Community Triumph. It won her a third Emmy. When she thanked me for the story, I told her the truth. I didn't win alone. At Christmas, Sarah Chen's daughter gave me a drawing she made in school. It was a crayon picture of a house with a stick figure holding a giant paper labeled Deed. She wrote, "Thank you, Mr. Dakota," in bright orange letters. I placed it on my fridge with a magnet shaped like Colorado. Every time I looked at it, I remembered the storm I survived. Sometimes on quiet nights, I sat on my cabin porch with a cup of coffee and stared at the tree line. I thought about my grandfather. I imagined him smiling in that stubborn, proud way he used to. I kept his note framed above my desk. Don't let the bastards take what's yours. I didn't. And because of that, 96 families slept safely in homes built on land no one could take away again. A scholarship fund now carried my grandfather's name, helping students study engineering, forestry, or environmental science. The trust became something bigger than me, bigger than all of us. It became a legacy. In the end, I didn't just keep the land. I kept its soul alive. And now, like I tell everyone who hears my story, keep your receipts. All of them.